All right, welcome to this third video. What we're going to do here is before you can really jump in and learn how to use a compressor, it would really behoove you to know what compression sounds like and what compression is doing to the audio. And so we're going to take a few minutes in this video, and I'm just going to play you some different tracks and let you hear what compression does to these tracks. Because it doesn't do us much good to jump into ratios and techniques for compressing and thresholds and attack and all that, and for me to start adjusting all those things if you aren't really sure what compression does as far as how it makes the audio sound. We've talked about in the first couple of videos what compression does. Technically, it reduces dynamic range, it adds gain reduction, all of these things. But what does that mean to the sound? What does it sound like? And that's a big part of what we're going to do now, is take a listen so you can be more comfortable with what compression sounds like, with what it's going to do to the signal, so you have an idea before you actually start compressing. You know what compression is probably going to do, so you have a little bit of a goal in mind every time you use compression. Now, I'm only going to take you a part of the way there in this video. I'm not going to spend 8 hours drilling you with compression drills so you listen and listen and listen until you're completely sick of it. What I suggest for you to do is to watch this video, listen to the samples I'm going to play for you, and then go back and open up some of your sessions and open up a compressor on all the different tracks and solo each one and listen to what the compressor is doing. Because this is something I can't teach you in the course of a couple of hours of tutorial videos. I can get you started. I can tell you what to listen for, but the rest is your responsibility to spend the time listening and getting familiar with compression and what it sounds like. And the more familiar you are with it, the better able you will be to use it appropriately in your mixes. If you never really quite know what compression is going to do to the sound, then you're never really going to use a compressor properly, and you're not going to get the most out of it. So that's your homework after this video. At some point, go spend some time with a compressor. Dedicate the next couple of weekends, an hour or two, to just messing around with a compressor and really getting familiar with the way it sounds. And what'll happen, and this I can promise you, if you do invest the time in learning how the compressor sounds and what a compressor does to the audio, you're going to find that as you listen to songs on an album or on the radio, you're going to hear the compression a lot more than you used to be able to. So you'll be able to tell, wow, they compressed that vocal a little too much, or wow, the release on the compression on that guitar part is really fast and it sounds a little awkward. Or you'll say there's too much compression on that acoustic guitar and it makes the pick noise sound unrealistic and too loud. There's just all sorts of things. The compression on the entire mix, compression on individual instruments. You're going to pick those things out as you learn to listen to compression and listen for the things that it does to the sound. So that's why I'm excited to do this video series and to get you moving in the right direction, because contrary to popular belief, compression is not evil. So it's not this big horrible thing that just ruins the sound. If you don't use it properly, it will absolutely ruin the sound. But if you do use it properly, it's a great way. I mean, it's a useful, really effective tool for creating nice, good sounding, tight, loud mixes. Not too loud, not overcompressed, but nice and loud and present. So that's what we're going for here. All right, so I've got a session here. If we zoom out, this session has drums, bass, organ, a bunch of guitars, acoustic, electric, percussion. There's just lots of things going on here, so it's got a lot of things for us to listen to. So I'm going to go through and just play a few different tracks, solo them up, and let you listen to what they sound like with compression. Now, what I'll probably do is do fairly over-the-top compression so you can hear extreme examples, because that's one helpful way to learn about compression. Because what you'll find is when you start using compression, the first thing you're going to want to do is to overuse it. And that's totally fine. That's understandable. You'll grow out of it in a sense. But for the first several times you use compression, you're going to be knocking off 15, 20 dB of gain reduction, and you're going to think it's awesome. And you'll come out of that and you'll find some middle ground to where you're not avoiding compression altogether, but you're also not over-compressing everything. So to listen to it in a fairly aggressive, over-compressed state will give you an example of what's gone too far, and you'll hear what's happening. and it'll help you recognize what compression is doing, and hearing it in the over-the-top scenario will make it a little easier for you to spot it when you're doing it over the top, and you can dial it back and still get the benefits without going too far. Okay, so here's the lead vocal. We'll start with that because 9 times out of 10, probably closer to 100% of the time, I'm going to compress the lead vocal of a song I'm mixing. And the reason for that is we want it to be nice and upfront. We want it to cut through the mix. We want it to be louder than everything else. And one way to ensure that is to use compression. So I've got a vocal here.
Boy, how this river used to flow.
And turn that up a little bit. And I've got a little EQ on there just to make it, we're just talking about compression, so I didn't want to use the un-EQ'd version.
Boy, how this,
a little too woofy, so.
Boy, how this river used to flow.
Okay, so we've got that, and then we've got a compressor. Now, I'm not going to talk about what I'm doing on the compressor as much as just let you hear it. So if you're watching the video, I mean, you don't really have to watch, just listen. And if you're listening to the audio version, great, because that's really what I want you to do is listen with your ears, particularly in this video, as we listen to compression. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some fairly dramatic compression here, and then we'll take a listen and compare.
Boy, how this river used to flow, rushing me into new lands. It would take me anywhere I want to go, but now it's all out of my hands. I've been treading water, I'm treading water.
Okay, now I'm trying to not overload the inputs of the mixer that's mixing all these sounds together, so there's no distortion, so you can hear things well. So if you want to turn up your headphones or speakers a little bit, I just turned it down slightly to make sure it works well. Okay, so just basically here, it's compressing it by about 12 dB.
Boy, how this river used to flow.
Hanging out around 6, getting as high as 12. And I'm just adjusting the output gain to where it's roughly the same level when we listen to it bypassed and not bypassed.
Boy, how this river used to flow.
So right now the compressed signal is a little louder, so we'll turn this down. And the reason for this is we want to compare just what compression does to the sound, not if we left this louder, then all we'll come away with is saying, oh, compression made it louder. That's not all compression's doing. So if we set the gain appropriately, then they'll sound roughly at the same volume, and we can hear the differences between the two. So when you're setting up this weekend, if you're going to set up a session just to listen to compression, do this. Set it to where it's compressing quite a bit.
Boy, how this river used to flow.
And then listen with and without the compression by using the bypass, and make sure they're at as close to the same volume, so then you can really listen to just the differences that compression is doing to the audio.
Boy, how this river used to flow. Boy, how this river used to flow.
Okay, that sounds to be right at the same volume. So we are good to go, and see if we can't take a listen here. So I'll just go through phrase by phrase, and I'll play it through once without compression and then once with compression. And I'm not going to talk in between, because one of the big things when you're A-Bing things, if you have any break between listening to the first example and the second one, it really messes with your head, and you can't really make an objective. You can't really listen objectively. So I'm going to just stop talking for a few minutes, play a phrase without compression and then with compression. If you get confused, if you're watching the video, you get confused as to which one I'm doing, when the plugin over here is blue, that means it's bypassed, so you're not hearing compression. And when it's gray, that means you are hearing compression. But for those of you who are just listening to the audio, not watching the screen, each example you hear will be uncompressed first, and then when I play it again, it'll be compressed. Okay, got it? We're on the same page? We're good to go? Okay, here we go.
Boy, how this river used to flow. Boy, how this river used to flow. Rushing me into new lands. Rushing me into new lands. It would take me anywhere I want to go. It would take me anywhere I want to go. It would. But now it's all out of my hands. But now it's all out of my hands. I've been treading water, I'm treading water. I've been treading water, I'm treading water.
Okay, so we went through the whole verse there. Hopefully, I think you're starting to hear a difference. I'm going to adjust this gain just a little bit so they're a little better matched. Now let's listen to the chorus. The chorus I sing even louder, and we'll do the same thing. First you'll hear uncompressed, and then compressed. Here we go.
Well, I need some white water. Well, I need some white water. Something unpredictable, dangerous and fast. Something unpredictable, dangerous and fast. Well, I'd settle for waterfall. Something. Well, I'd settle for waterfall. But I just don't know how much longer I can last. But I just don't know how much longer I can last.
Okay, so why do I spend so much time on a vocal? Well, before you freak out, we're not going to be listening to, we're not going to be listening to just to every track in this much detail, but the reason I do it on vocals is because I think vocals is the best learning tool for compression. There's a lot of things going on here that you may or may not have heard that are really telltale signs that we're compressing the signal. And while it's the same and applies to guitars and bass and everything else, it's most noticeable on a vocal. At least I think so. So that's why we're going to focus primarily on this. And then we'll listen to examples with a bunch of other tracks just so you have an idea. But that just so you know, that's how we're going to get things rolling here to start. Okay, so first things first, you obviously could hear a difference. Hopefully you can. If not, go back, rewind the video, and listen through to those again. Do it a couple times, and just remember the first track is not compressed, the second take is compressed. And really listen to what the volume sounds like, what the tone of the voice sounds like. But for the most part, you can probably tell that there's something going on here.
Boy, how this river used to flow. Boy, how this river used to flow.
Now, this is over-compressed, but it's not completely uncommon for this much compression to be happening on a vocal. Just depends on the song. But what we can hear, there's a couple of things going on here, and things that compression does. One of the things is, since we've said before, and I'm going to say this probably several more times, so bear with me, but compression turns up quiet parts and turns down the louder parts. Now we hear that especially, we hear that especially in the chorus. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. Listen to, as I play this first line of the chorus, listen to what's happening with the breath of the vocal. When I breathe in to sing the line and breathe in between phrases, listen to what happens. I'm going to play it without compression, then with compression, and listen to the difference.
Well, I need some white water. Well, I need some white water.
Okay, did you hear that? Particularly right at the beginning of the first phrase.
Well,
that breath that I took in, that's a lot louder. Here's without compression. Here's with. So that initially, it's much louder. You can hear it even more at the end of the phrase.
Water, water.
I mean, it's almost like I went, like breathed heavily out there. And I didn't, but that's just what compression's doing. Listen to this phrase again. When I sing water and I let the breath out at the end of the phrase, listen to how much louder that breath is.
White water.
That's unnaturally loud. And that's what compression does. It's unnatural. And so now, what's the point of this? Am I teaching you how to make the breath sounds louder? No, that's not really the point. But that's one of the telltale signs of compression. And what I'm trying to point out is that it allows you to hear those little details. So if there are little things the vocalist is doing that don't sound great, perhaps in the way that he breathes or little noises between phrases, compression is going to bring that out because it turns up the quiet stuff. The other thing you're going to notice is since you're hearing the quiet things, you can hear the room that I recorded it in a lot more with compression added to it.
Dangerous and fast. Well, I'd settle for waterfall, but I just don't know.
Okay, in this example, you can't hear it quite as well, but you can in certain examples, and it makes sense. If you don't acoustically treat your room, then the recording is going to have a good bit of the room sound in the recording. And if you compress that signal on top of that, then that sound of your room is going to be even louder. So that's a big part of what compression does. Now, the other thing, the more obvious thing that compression does is it turns down the louder parts. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, this section here, for example, this is with compression on.
Dangerous and fast.
Okay. That all sounded roughly the same volume, but I obviously didn't sing it all the same volume, especially like this phrase.
Well, I'd settle for waterfall.
It's like the end of that phrase that part I sing quietly because I can't sing that loud and do that little run with the notes. But what compression did is by turning down the louder sections.
Well, I'd settle for.
You hear like on that 4, when I go up to the high note, I sing that fairly loud because it's high for me, but it's being turned down. You can hear the compression turning it down. If we look at the screen, you can see that visually happening.
Well, I'd settle for waterfall.
So compression is turning down those loud parts to make it more of a consistent volume. Here's without compression.
Well, I'd settle for waterfall.
So it still sounds okay, but it's a little piercing because the loudest parts, to get everything to sound as loud as we want it to, then the loudest part of that section kind of are in our face and not in a good way. Kind of hurts the ears. With compression, since we're turning everything down and making it more one volume or a smaller range of volumes, it can be loud without hurting our ears.
Well, I'd settle for waterfall.
You hear how that sounds kind of tight, and it doesn't sound like it really hurts your ears as opposed to without compression.
Well, I'd settle for.
Kind of sounds like I'm standing in front of you screaming in your face, and it's roughly the same volume, but now with compression sounds better.
Well, I'd settle for waterfall.
And so the downsides of the breathiness, like right here, that breath between the words, while that's a downside or at least a side effect of compression, the benefit is that it turns down these louder sections in such a way that makes them accessible. So now I can listen to this in the context of the full mix, and I can hear the vocal, and it sounds plenty loud, and it doesn't cut through so much that it hurts my ears. Let's take a listen to that. I'll turn the reverb and the delay back on, and you can hear what it sounds like. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play it for you real quick as it sounds in the mix, and then I'll go back and play it for you without compression. You can hear what the difference.
Well, I'd settle for waterfall, but I just don't know how much longer I can live.
Okay. Now if we listen to it without compression, listen to it now.
Well, I'd settle for waterfall. but I just don't know.
It just kind of sits on top of it, and it just sounds a little amateur to me. It sounds like the vocal is way out in front, and turning it down is not going to fix that because it needs to be compressed and tightened up a little bit. So now with compression, it sits there, it's loud, you can still hear it, but it doesn't hurt your ears.
Well, I'd settle for waterfall.
Another thing to note is compression is great for vocals because, like we've said a bajillion times now, it turns up the quiet parts. And what that means is, think about when you're singing or listening to a vocal. What are the quietest parts of a vocal? Well, usually it's the consonants. It's the breath, like we've talked about, and also the consonants. So the T's and the S's and all the things that help us understand what the words are to the song, those are usually the quietest part. And in the context of a big old mix, it's easy to get those things lost. Well, here, with compression, you can hear the phrase is, I don't know how much longer, or I just don't know how much longer I can last. And the way compression's working is, since it's turned down the louder parts and turned up the quieter parts, we can hear all those consonants and understand what I'm singing.
But I just don't know how much longer I can last.
Like, think of those last line, I can last. The C in can. I didn't sing it like that where it goes k really loud. I can last. But with compression, it brought that up. And it's pretty effective. Let me solo that and you can hear it. This is without compression.
Longer I can last.
So that's fine. It wasn't too terribly loud, the C and can. But in the context of the mix, you can't hear it as well.
Longer I can last.
It still would work okay, but listen to how compression really brings that out.
Longer I can last.
So that's what we're talking about here. Compression can do all sorts of great things, and I think you're probably already getting the idea, and you can hear your mind's probably going crazy with ideas of what you can use compression for. But that's what compression sounds like. So let's take a few moments, now that we've got the basic gist, you understand what compression does to the sound, let's just hear what it does to different pieces of audio. So for example here, this is an acoustic guitar. Okay. Okay, and we've got compression on here. Let me just pull this up. This is a different compressor, and we're gonna adjust it real quickly just to make sure we're in the same ballpark volume-wise. Okay, that seems fairly consistent volume-wise, but very different in the sound. So here's what I'm going to do. Same thing, we're just going to play a couple of bars of this without compression, then I'll add compression, and you tell me what you hear. Okay, so hopefully what you can hear there is, the first thing, the quiet parts are louder. You can hear the pick on the guitar a lot more distinctly. But the downside is you can hear the noise in the room more distinctly too. You hear as soon as the guitar started playing, the noise went away. That's one of the things compression does. Because here it's not compressing. And then as soon as the guitar starts playing, it's compressing again. But because the makeup gain is set so high, it makes those quieter parts louder. So that's one of the big downsides. The other thing you'll notice is the guitar, it's a lot of the same stuff. It doesn't seem to punch through as much with the compression, and meaning it doesn't jump out and seem like it jumps out of place with compression in place. Now this is too much compression, I'll give you that, but you can hear how the guitar doesn't seem to, it seems to sit a lot more consistently with the compression than without. Here's without compression again. And then with. You can almost hear as I play louder on the guitar, it doesn't get any louder in volume. The compression kicks in even more. And you can hear that especially over in this section. So those sections should be louder, should come through louder in real life because I'm playing those parts harder and louder, but they're not because of the compression. So it's tightening things up and making it sound more one consistent volume. Okay, that's acoustic guitar. Let's look at electric guitar. That's kind of the same thing. Electrics, especially distorted electrics, you're not going to get much out of. I'll be honest. I'll play you a quick clip here. But electric guitars with any distortion on them already have a lot of compression because distortion essentially adds compression to the signal. That's one of the ways it distorts it, is by compressing it a lot. So you'll find you're not going to be compressing electric guitars quite as much as you probably would something else, or you might not need compression at all because of the way it sounds. So let's take a listen to, this is stereo electric guitars. Okay, so as you can hear, it sounds fairly compressed without compression. And then with compression. So really the only place you hear it is the very first note. That first note really cuts through really well and punches without being too loud, whereas before, that very first downbeat is kind of wimpy here. But with compression, it really cuts through. And that's because we've got a compressor here with the attack set a little bit slower. So it lets that first note through that's been boosted a lot, and then it turns down everything else. Almost has a percussive sound to it. That's the main reason why I use compression on electric guitars. So you hear what that sounds like. The next thing we're going to look at is, we'll look at bass real quick. Actually, let's look at drums. That's a fairly obvious one to listen to. Okay, we've got compression on this drum kit. So let's solo up the drums. Go to where the drums are. Okay, this is going to be fairly dramatic, and you'll be able to hear the difference quite a bit. Here's the uncompressed drums. And here is with compression. Notice how the kick drum sounds tighter. It's not necessarily better. It just, the kick drum has this kind of foom, foom, foom sound to it, like it's being sucked in. and the snare kind of, instead of sounding like a real crack kind of fuck, this kind of whack sound, it's more of a mushy kind of a whoosh sound, because instead of just the transient coming through, it's compressing the whole thing. So now where he hits the drum head and where it kind of rings out for a second is all a lot louder and all kind of the same volume, and so it sounds a little more, it's just different. So you'll notice all the quiet things are louder now. The cymbals are a little bit louder, the snares on the drum are louder, the kick drum, the subtleties of the kick drum are louder, and just the whole thing sounds different. So let's listen again. This is without compression, and then I'll play it with compression. So it sounds more roomy, more organic, and a big part of that is because what's happening there is you're hearing more of the room, because, like we said before, it's since it brings up the quieter parts, it brings up the sound of the room, so the drums sound roomier.
Need some. What?
All right.
Something unpredictable, dangerous and fair.
Okay, so that's pretty much it. We'll look at we're gonna look at bass in the next video. We'll talk about when I'm showing you how to do compression and kind of the step by step. I've got kind of roughly around 6 or 7 steps to compression that I'm going to show you, and we're going to show you that with bass. So I'll save that for that video. I won't show you that in this one, but hopefully this has been a helpful video. We're right at 32 minutes, so it's a little bit longer time to be listening to things, but I encourage you, take a break. Come back tomorrow and watch this video again and listen to those examples, because that's going to be a big part, like I said before, of how you learn how to compress and how to be more confident, because you'll be able to recognize what it's doing. So the flip side of this, the reason I'm showing you all of this, is if you've got a mix and you're listening to a track and you turn it up with the fader like this, and it's louder, but then it's too loud, you turn it down, it's too quiet, up it's too loud, down it's too quiet, you can't find a middle ground. That's a prime example of where compression is going to help, because it's going to help you to turn things up and make it louder, or at least seem louder, without being too loud and having certain sections cut through too much and cause problems and clipping and just sound like with that lead vocal. When we played the uncompressed vocal in the mix, it was loud, but it just didn't sound very good because it was sitting too far on top of the mix. If we were to turn that down, then it would be too quiet. We couldn't make out what I was saying. Compression lets us have it both ways, where it's plenty loud in the mix, but it's also not really too loud so that it doesn't sound good. So I know we covered a lot. Take a break and come back and watch this video tomorrow or the next day, and the more and more you practice this stuff, the better you're going to be. It may not happen overnight. It may still seem a little mysterious to you, but I promise if you start just messing around with compression, remember the things you learned in these videos, take a few notes, you're going to end up doing fairly well. So good luck to you, and we'll see you in the next video.